It's so satisfying how this matches in. We're going for a yellow theme today. Hello and welcome back to the Sketchpad Pod. I'm Alicia and I just wanted to have a little catch up, a little heart to heart about how my degree is going and my thoughts, fears, feelings on my looming graduation, because I'm assuming that some of you out there are also art students or uni students and maybe having a similar sense of dread over what's to come in the next few months. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. So I am set to graduate in June. I handed in my dissertation. So now pretty much all that stands before graduation for me is my grad show. For those of you that don't know, art degrees often end the degree with a grad show where all of the students' work is shown together and they get in lots of industry folk, important people that might be able to buy your work or give you a job. So it's a really important event, but also there has been a lot of critique around the grad show. A lot of universities stopped doing their grad shows during COVID. We actually had quite a lot of debates with our uni because they wanted to change the format of our grad show. I have no idea how I'm going to be showing my work yet. That's still a long way away. But the main thing I wanted to talk about is graduation and what comes after graduation. So I am studying and living in London, and I never saw myself as someone that was gonna go to a city uni, gonna live in London. I initially got a place at York to go and study history of art and English, and then I went and did my art foundation and completely changed my mind and decided that I wanted to stick with art. And as soon as I made that decision, I knew that the best option for me was to go to London because it's close to where I grew up and it's got some of the best art universities in the country and in some cases in the world. And also London has so many galleries, so many museums, and it's got a lot of artists living and working in the area. So that was kind of my thinking of coming to London, and I'm really glad I did, although it's been different because of COVID, and I feel like there's so much still to explore and learn about the city, and perhaps that's one reason that I'm thinking of staying, but also the consideration for anyone who's thinking about staying or moving to London after uni is always going to be the money. People don't like to talk about finances, but it is a big consideration, I know, for me and for a lot of my friends graduating. Sometimes it can come across that artists will graduate and they'll immediately go and get a little studio, they'll go and get a residency, which is where a gallery or a programme or institution helps fund your artistic practice. And those are obviously the ideals, but not everyone ends up doing that. Not everyone wants to do that, but sometimes that's just not how life works. There's only a certain amount of residencies available, and they're not normally targeted at BA graduates. Normally they say that you shouldn't go into a residency until 2 or 3 years after studying. So then if you want to have a studio, that's a separate space to your accommodation that you're having to pay for and hire out. And then also where you're living in London, prices of accommodation are very high, and council tax as well. So I do know friends that are thinking of moving out of London. I also have some friends that will still be studying, so they'll still be here. And then there's a few of us that are kind of keeping our fingers crossed to find maybe cheaper accommodation and find enough work to pay our bills and to stay. With that in mind, I think there's often the thing of, do I go into a job that is less related to the arts or less related to my long-term goals to pay the bills, or do I try and pursue getting a studio space or focusing on my art practice and maybe being less financially secure? There's no right or wrong answer to that. For me, I had a meeting with one of our careers advisors at uni this last week, which was really, really useful. So I would suggest for anyone that is struggling with these decisions or is fearing this sort of abyss of graduation, that they talk to their careers department or to their student union. Student unions can be really good with this sort of thing. One of the things she said to me was, what do you want to do, not what should you do? Obviously, sometimes people have commitments or restrictions that mean that the idea of what they want to do is not in question. I am very lucky in that I don't have any dependents. I'm not supporting any family members financially, and that I have no disabilities, or that I have certain privileges of who I am as a person. That makes it easier for me to get a job than someone who perhaps has dependents that they have to care for, or perhaps hasn't had the opportunities presented to them to get them on that ladder as quickly, on that work ladder as quickly, or just that society as a whole restricts certain people more than others. We all know this, but I think also it is true that sometimes society as a whole, or people around you, such as friends or family, especially when you're an artist, have certain fears or certain worries about you going straight into the arts, and can pressure you into certain expectations. So that might be that they feel like going into the arts isn't financially viable, that it isn't a proper job, that it's not as respectable. They worry that you won't be able to find work, all these sorts of things. And we understand where those fears come from. They come from a place of often just wanting the best for you and just caring for you and concern. But it also comes from a sort of rhetoric around artists and art makers that has been perpetuated in the way that we talk about artists and the way that we value art in our society. I mean, you just have to think back to that awful government campaign. If I can find it, I will put it here. And also across COVID, the reductions of funding for the arts is a massive example of how our government and in general people value the arts less, even though it's one of the largest industries in the UK, and especially if you're including things like film and media and journalism. I would all consider those forms of art, and they can be very, very lucrative if that's the main aim. So with that in mind, it's good to think about, if you've set a certain goal or a certain idea of what comes after graduation, is that an image or an ideal that is something that you truly want, or is it something that you think you should want because your parents are telling you that's the right thing, or your friends are telling you that's the right thing, or your tutor is, or people online, or the government, you know? Are there outside influences that are making you think that you should or shouldn't do something? Why are they saying that? Do they have valid reasons? But also, how much of it is out of fear? I think those are really important things to consider. And I'm not saying this as if I have everything together and my goals set and that I'm not swayed or influenced by all of the people around me, because of course I am. You know, I feel like I should stay in London because London has this reputation for being the place to live and work if you want to make it in the arts. There are lots of vibrant art communities outside of London in the UK and then abroad. There's no saying that I need to stay in London, but part of me feels like I should stay in London, but then part of me wants to because I've enjoyed my time here and I feel like there's lots more to explore and I've got lots of friends here. You know, part of me would love to say that I'm going to dedicate 2 days or 3 days to making art and that I'm going to keep creating, putting my art out there, getting into group projects, networking. But then how do I financially support that? And also, who am I making my art for? Where am I wanting my art to be seen? If I set up in a studio and I'm making work, am I then expecting to take it into an exhibition or a gallery? And those are big processes in themselves and tricky to do. And then who sees them in a gallery space? But if I don't try and make my work marketable, again, financially, is it worth me spending my time on this thing that isn't actually making any sort of monetary value? And that brings me to this idea of value. We put a lot of emphasis on money, and I think it is, unfortunately, a big factor. I've just spent a while talking about the fact that the decision for me to stay or go will definitely rely on having some sort of income. But also there is this idea that for artists to be successful, they have to be visible, recognised, and they have to be making money potentially, that it has to be productive, that they're not just making arts for art's sake. And this is something I'm really struggling with, because I think that's never the first intention when going to make art, or at least it isn't for me. I never sit down to paint a painting or to write a poem and think, right, what is the best painting that I can do to sell, to make money? You know, that's just never been the way I do it. And I think you have to reevaluate what are the most important values and the most important reasons as to why you're doing something. So if I'm not doing it to be commercial, then although that can be an important aspect for stability and emotional well-being sometimes, there is another side to it, and how am I feeling that? Whether that be taking the financial burden off the art itself and getting a full-time job that is not related to the arts, or getting 3 jobs or whatever that take the financial burden off it, and then allow the art to just be. That could be an option, but then doing that, you then have to account for the time that you are spending with each aspect of your career and your creative life. But part of me also still has that little bit of the romantic idealism of going out on my own and trying to make it as an artist. But then I ask myself, what does it mean to be a professional artist, a successful artist to me? And is that kind of ideal something that's being constructed and it's not really how it works in real life? You know, it's complex. I don't really have an answer to any of these things, but it is these personal questions that will hopefully lead you and me in the right direction. I would really love to know, what are your main fears about graduation? Maybe it's not a job or money or art, maybe it's about location, or maybe it's about how you're going to stay connected with your friends and your family, or maybe you're really excited and that's great. So let me know down in the comments, I'd love to hear. And if you want to hear more about this, I can do some updates as I go along, but I'm going to finish the ramble here just to save our sanity, and I will see you in the next one.